Okay, so today I am absolutely delighted to be joined by Zoe Melarkey, who is head of comms at Ocado. And when I first sat down with Zoe to ask her to join this podcast, I was just so struck by her, mostly her presence, really sharp, so smart, just really refreshingly direct. She is an incredible communicator, really upfront, realistic, and open. And it's really captivating. I think everyone listening is going to hear that today. And at a time, I think, where we talk so much about authenticity, I think Zoe really oozes it. So I'm so excited for you to hear our conversation. Zoe's got oodles of experience from MFI to Empower to Purple Bricks and now Ocado. She talks about the power of people with real passion, truly hearing from them and bringing their stories to life, and thrives on holding a mirror up to businesses. So, Zoe, welcome to Winning Minds.
Thank you so much. That's embarrassing, but very kind.
Well, very true. I'm very excited that we are sitting down together. Our sort of schedules have been shifting, haven't they? But we have found a moment, which is brilliant.
Yeah, perfect. Looking forward to it.
Great. So my first question is kind of deliberately cheeky, Zoe. It's kind of an acknowledgement that, being in this game, championing real voices. I mean, when we first sat down, you talked about holding a mirror up to the business. It's a tricky job, I think. The empathy gap in businesses is a real thing. People have got all sorts of kind of conflicting priorities. I think there are moments whereby it can feel kind of difficult, kind of knocking on closed doors, maybe even. And so I'm really interested to ask you my first question, which is, why'd you bother?
I think it's just so fundamental to business success, basically. If businesses don't listen to what's out there, I mean, they can literally go under overnight. You mentioned MFI. I've definitely seen it happen where, look, when I was young, a long time ago, everybody shopped at an MFI. Used to get those sort of white and red bedroom furniture items. I don't know if you remember them, but I remember going and being very excited. But when I worked for MFI, they basically at that time everybody used them, and then they decided to sell off all the space and deliver to customers. You had to book a slot and book a delivery slot, and basically IKEA just jumped into that market with the understanding that what customers really wanted is, if you're redoing your kid's bedroom, you probably want it there and then. You want to go round, you want to people are quite quick when they're thinking about, if you're suddenly deciding to redo a room, most of the time you want to crack on with it. And they just didn't really listen to customers and sold off all of that the real estate that was behind their stores that allowed them to hold the stock. And it just meant overnight, really, the business model was doomed. And so I think for brands, if you don't listen to customers, if you don't sort of understand what customers are after, it can actually be a death knell. So that's number one. It's just fundamental. I think number two is, I think it's fun. One of the values we talk about at Ocado is always be curious. And I think we should spend our time being on our toes, being agile, listening to what people are wanting. And actually, goodness knows, no, the world is changing faster and faster. The changes that are coming over the hill are so quick, so rapid. So if we don't have that agility and ability to respond quickly, again, I feel like you can see the brands that are doing that well and the ones that aren't. You look around the high streets, you can see brands instantly going out of business because they're not responding and aren't sort of open to changing the way they perform.
I love that. I love that understanding, that really kind of deep need for people. You're so right. That moment where you're doing up your home, you're in transformation mode. You're buying, a better you. You want to achieve it today. You don't want to wait however long. That sort of like itchiness to kind of move forward, that kind of momentum, understanding what you're really buying, I think, is as you say, just so critical.
Yeah, I love that. You're absolutely right. You're not just buying a new table, are you? You're buying, it's like when people go to a hairdresser and say, I want to look like this. It's not just a haircut, it's about a vision of how they want to live. So yeah, to then go, we can deliver you 2 weeks on Tuesday, just kind of misses the moment, misses what customers want.
I'm so excited to ask you this next question because you've had such an interesting career. So I'm keen to hear kind of where you take it. But I'm very interested in people's experiences, what's kind of led them to where they are. And I always find it a fascinating question just to ask, who do you oh, we're all standing on the shoulders of kind of so many people. I'm sure there's lots of people, whether you know them really well or they're kind of more distant characters, or even kind of authors from a book that have shaped what you do and how you think. But if I were to ask you to reflect on one, kind of who comes to mind?
Yeah, I found this really hard actually, this question. And I came to the conclusion that it starts with my mum. So my mum was an English teacher, very, very, very bright. She went to Cambridge, very, very clever, but really passionate about being a teacher. So she always wanted to be a teacher and give back. Absolutely obsessed with Shakespeare. I remember getting taken to see sort of King Lear when I was literally 5. She was, real full-on English teacher. And so I guess I was very exposed to books and novels and critics, and we used to talk a lot about, so there are a lot of influences in that, and my passion, at A level and university was very much definitely English and that type of world. And then I came to the conclusion in answering your question that beyond that, I think it's like a patchwork quilt. The idea of it takes a village to raise a child. I think it's that we are the sum of all our conversations, I think, and that almost you can learn something from everybody you come across. So I think, there's so many colleagues through my career I could point to, so many books I've read. So I'm a really avid consumer of books and at the moment podcasts now, and just constantly consuming. Interestingly, I don't really listen to music, so the audio word is very important to me. I'm always listening and having those conversations. So I love books from sort of, Jim Collins, Good to Great, and business theory, through to psychology books, Thinking Fast and Slow, things like The Chimp Paradox, right through to fiction, and people like Rory Sutherland, who's really interesting. We've had him in to speak at Ocado, and he's fascinating about the way minds work. So I guess I really believe in that almost every conversation you have with somebody you can learn. Put simply, the old adage, every day is a school day, that you're just constantly learning and picking up. So I couldn't really point to many one individuals, but I think it's that the joy of just adding little tidbits and pieces of knowledge every time you interact with somebody.
Yeah, amazing. So beautifully put. And so nice to hear it your mum as well. And I am very keen to sort of talk to you more about your role.
Mhm.
Um, you know, you've got a lot that you're looking after. Thinking about the business. You mentioned earlier when we were talking, almost sometimes you're kind of, remember to let us into the secrets. Naturally, you're kind of working with the media as well. So lots of different considerations. You talk really passionately at the start about just the importance of never taking your eye off of what matters for customers. So what are your secrets? How do you manage to do all of that?
Well, there's various things I think you need to be aware of. I mean, I think cultural storytelling. I guess, funny enough, I was talking about my English background, wasn't I, or love for English. I feel like cultural storytelling is absolutely the key to great brands and marketing. So my advice would be this: listening all the time, talking to customers, chatting to them, and it's a simple and easy way of doing it. You can actually spend huge amounts on loads of different projects, but ultimately, if you actually just listen to customers and understand what they want, as I've talked about.
It'd be great to hear what are some of your favourite ways or kind of most effective ways in which you unlock that.
I think, look, storytelling is everything. I've talked about English, and I think if you can tell the right stories, that is the key to building a great brand. Um, so I think a lot of the time, I just encourage everybody to really listen to their customers. It's quite easy to be in your sort of ivory tower in marketing or in companies, particularly for a brand like ours where you don't have stores. Obviously, a lot of retailers talk about, going out and walking the floor and being available, and the old sort of Terry Leahy walking, sort of every Friday in a Tesco store, but we don't have that. So you need to work that muscle a bit harder if you're in an online space. And so what we did at Ocado with our great research team is set up a customer listening. So we have different customer listening groups that the whole company can listen to every month, a different tranche of customers coming in. So whether it's younger people or people who've shopped on Ocado for a long time, or equally lapsed customers. So what made you stop shopping on Ocado, or people who shop on competitors, and really asking them and pulling apart those questions of, well, what is it you like? So I'll give you one example. We know at Ocado a real blocker to shopping online in general is freshness. And people believe, I shop better for myself than you will ever shop. I believe that if I'm going into a store, I will, lift up that one tray and take the fresher mushrooms, or I'll check the best before date. And we knew that that was a big blocker for us. And that's why, as a company, we've then spent an awful lot of time looking at freshness and cutting down the amount of time that a product stays in our, we call them customer fulfillment centers, CFCs. So we've deliberately, the commercial team have worked incredibly hard to narrow that window so that people feel they are getting really fresh product with the longest possible shelf life. But all of that came from a customer insight, or customer insights, I should say, around a real blocker to shop online.
Yeah, amazing, isn't it? How those moments can be so powerful as a launch pad. It's not, it's almost listening, but it's almost sort of waiting for that inspiration to strike.
Yeah, exactly. And there's so much. The other thing that we see an awful lot at the moment is the influence of social media on food. I think it's really interesting. I've got a theory that you know, people used to rebel, or younger people's kind of music used to be so different to their parents or their clothes or their fashion. I've got 15, 16-year-old boys, and now honestly, we'll happily go to the same clothes shops, we'll happily listen to the same music. But what I think we are seeing is a lot of creativity and expression of younger, maybe sort of Gen X, on in food. And actually, if you look at the food trends that are happening now, so people are sharing stuff on social, and then we can literally, again at Ocado, because we are online, we can see the spikes and the changes the next day. So the day, for example, that Tim Spector did the Diary of a CEO podcast, we could see the spike in gut health and people looking for gut health products, and that instant reaction, or Dubai chocolate, and that being a trend. Right now, people are very interested in radishes. There's a big thing about radishes on TikTok, and again, we can see, or pistachios are massive. Pistachio cream from M&S is amazing, and we can literally see that trend passing from an influencer will share something, become a trend, and then overnight the impact on sales. And that's again a beauty of a brand like Ocado. We can respond to that and get those products in quicker than anyone else. So it's that kind of, what are people interested in, that curiosity, and then turning that into action.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think it's incredible, the world of food. I mean, on our study that we run at Kokoro, we've been tracking it for 5 years. We speak to people every single week, and I almost can't believe some of the metrics changing. I mean, food is the star of Christmas. We've hit every year. I think we've hit a ceiling, and it kind of keeps going. And I think in a world whereby we've had quite a lot sort of taken away from us through having to make kind of sort of smart choices about our money and all of those sorts of things, food is sometimes even a cost neutral, or just kind of small incremental cost way to scratch that itch for discovery, and newness and excitement. And so yeah, I almost quite kind of find it staggering
Yeah.
every time we kind of relook at something, just how kind of critical it is for people, and amazing that you can then react so fast. So brilliant to hear a bit more about your what you're really kind of doing and changing at Ocado. It would be amazing to reflect on my next question, which I've kind of deliberately framed as present tense. When I first sat down with you and told you about this question, you were kind of up for talking about present tense. The question is kind of what hurts, and I'm so interested in it because I think that we like to talk about failure. It's become a big thing to sort of talk about the challenges, the knotty bits, the negative parts. But my observation is, so often, whether it's on a podcast or whether it's a presentation or whatever, we talk about it when we've sort of done all the sweeping up and we've got a resolution from it. And so I'm really interested to know what you're maybe kind of currently wrestling with, what you're sort of pivoting, what kind of remains on the kind of challenge list for you at the moment.
Yeah, there's various things. I mean, I think one is just that kind of, again, I talked earlier about the pace of the world. So I don't think we've ever seen where, you go to sleep and wake up, and massive, massive events have happened based on, well, basically one person's decision making. So one is that understanding the sort of the business climate that we're in. The world feels quite crazy, and that's quite challenging. And I guess I'm quite enjoying AI at the moment, actually. But that is another point where the pace feels mad. And am I using it enough and in the right ways? And there's the moral dynamics. But I'm having quite a lot of fun with AI. But I think that does add more pressure to people. Um, Again, if I think when I started out in PR, one of the things we did very commonly was buy the morning papers and sit and look at the morning papers and understand what the agenda is. And it's just laughable now, really, that the idea that that would set you up for the day. So I think the pace is a really big one, and keeping abreast of that, while still doing the day job. I think social media is really interesting, and the connection between social and PR is becoming ever closer. Um, and certainly at Ocado, we are on, as all brands are really, on a journey looking at our social media. So we are particularly active on TikTok and Instagram, and we're using TikTok as our kind of bit more of a playground, appealing to slightly younger audiences, maybe being a little bit more edgy there. But it's that constant conversation about where else should we be. So YouTube Shorts, YouTube is obviously getting really massive, and we're on YouTube, but we're not. It's not our key priority for us at the moment. So we could do a lot more there. I think the whole theme around community is absolutely massive. And we know at Ocado we have very loyal customers and want to do more on community. So we're looking at, should we do a broadcast channel? Should we do more with influencers who are particularly loyal to Ocado, we only ever really work with influencers who are already Ocado shoppers. But can we do more at the sort of micro level of people who are Ocado shoppers day in, day out, like Refi have done, like really that community, create a community. I suppose what hurts, to answer your question, would be, where do you focus your efforts? Where do you focus your resources without spreading yourself too thinly, but also making sure that you're in the places you need to be?
Yeah. I mean, the seeing TikTok as a playground sounds really interesting to me. And yes, I know exactly what you mean. I would just wait 2 weeks for it to show up on Instagram. My final question is a bit of a sort of look at the future, really, really interested in your kind of perspective. And the question is, how will you keep winning? And I guess any thoughts, mindsets, mantras, kind of top things that people need to do to make sure they are kind of ahead of the game in this, that they are in tune with real people, that they are helping their brands move forward?
There's three main thoughts from me. One is, I think you can never assume that you know best. You have to have that constant ability to rethink and reframe what you know. Um, I just think it's really interesting that you have to sort of go to where other people are and understand the way they think. One of the things I find fascinating on that is that the idea that different languages, there's something called linguistic relativism, where basically different languages define colors in different ways. Do you know this?
Wow, I really do. I would love you to tell me a little bit about this.
I don't think it's absolutely fascinating. So, for example, I think in Russian they don't have the difference between dark blue and light blue, or other languages. Basically, different languages draw the lines in loads of places. So, some languages talk about blue and green is the same, and you have to say, is it um sky blue or leaf blue, or whatever the second word is. So basically, people cut the spectrum in different ways. So why I'm talking about that, though, is the idea that the way people think and the way they talk actually defines their whole reality. So it's just so important to understand that, that old cliche about there's my reality, your reality, and what really happened. So it's just that importance of constantly being flexible. And again, particularly, so the older you get, you can become very rigid, and you need to keep that flexibility and understand that the way people perceive the world is very different. So I definitely keep that, and don't assume you know best, as sort of point one. Number two, my team will know this because I talk about it quite a lot. I think specificity is really interesting. So when you're looking for sort of topics, I love the idea of sort of getting your geek on and doing a real sort of deep dive on topics. You can see this a lot on LinkedIn nowadays, actually. I know LinkedIn, we do a lot on LinkedIn, and actually the algorithm really likes it where people really sort of geek out on particular topics. And I think it's for my children growing up, actually, I think it's a really nice world that the beauty of social media, albeit it's got many concerns, but the beauty of social media is you can find your tribe. So if you are really into, oh, I don't know, there's people who knit for the top of post boxes, for example. I imagine if you wanted to find other people who knit for the top of post boxes, you could find a group of people. Whereas before, you'd have never been able to find other people who have those really geeky, or if you're a woodworker, you can find that group of people. So I think that idea of finding people's commonalities and area of passion, and finding that, meet the audience where they are. So basically be kind of platform agnostic, but go out and find those areas, I think is interesting. And then finally, I just urge people to stay optimistic. I think it is quite a scary world at the moment, but if you're going to listen to people, you kind of have to like them. And actually, if you feel negative and down on humanity, you can't then really communicate with people. I was listening to the Happiness Lab the other day, and they were saying that our scores of trust in people have dipped so enormously that we don't trust other people. And I think if you feel like that, again, you're going to be more rigid and less sort of open in your views. And I think maybe we just need to keep a degree of optimism.
Yeah, I think that is that is an amazing point, and I think sort of so important. And I think, there are always sort of two sides to the same story. We track trust, and it is declining in lots of areas, lots of big institutions. The area that it always climbs in is individuals, is in people, is in personalities. We see the rise of podcasts, and we can see that in kind of lots of our numbers. The other thing we really see is that following the news and things, or a desire to follow the news, is relatively flat, despite there being kind of quite a lot of news. What is really transforming is areas where we get real stories, following a particular person, more sort of maybe more like editorial things, that sort of thing, podcasts, and sort of stories, narratives we want, not just the kind of information. So I think so often there is optimism to be found. You look at it one way and you see it as bad. You look at it another way and you think, no, humans always adapt.
Yeah.
There's always we're always sort of striving to kind of right ourselves. And I loved what you said at the start. I hadn't realised about the colour relativity, but I've definitely heard things in language about, you've got certain languages, they've got just so many words for different types of rain or different types of snow and those sorts of things.
Yeah. There was a word, I can't remember what it is, but I remember reading about a word which is when somebody helps you with a job and expects you to be grateful, but you didn't really want the job done in the first place. I relate to that.
But I think that relativity point is so important. I mean, one of the big things for us over the last years, it will be for kind of so many people, is cost of living changes, how people are thinking and feeling about their money and those sorts of things. And I just think it's so interesting because a lot of people will report wanting to be more in control, wanting to be more considered, more planned, those sorts of things. And there was a period whereby nearly everybody was talking about cutting back, but you dig under that and you start to understand what cutting back means for some people and what cutting back means kind of for other people. And that importance to kind of get past some of that and really understand people's kind of real experiences and where they're kind of coming from, I think can be so valuable, as you say.
Yeah, interesting.
Well, hey, thank you so much for joining me today, Zoe. I have so enjoyed chatting to you. I think just so much kind of richness in there and kind of excitement in there, I think. And it is amazing because for so many people listening, they will be working in sort of, insights, that sort of realm. And so I think to hear from somebody who's using that, who's moving that forward, making decisions as a result of that, I think is just always very inspirational. So thank you so much for joining me.